Hello and welcome back to the Creative Journal podcast. This is entry 003, Toolkit for Creatives, where I go over all the most helpful tips, tricks, and resources I used as helped in my career as a creative, and I look forward to getting into them and sharing them with you guys. So without further ado, welcome to the show. Our first tip is a tip for long work sessions. So something that a lot of us as creatives and designers get into is we settle down for a nice bout of work and we have all these dreams, allure, grand visions of the things that we want to accomplish. And that can be very overwhelming in the moment. So by having some of these practical tips that I'm about to explain to you that have really helped me get into a good workflow, keep my mental state healthy, and really just sit down and be comfortable doing the work. This is 3 concrete tips you can use for long work sessions that allow you to get the most done going into them and spacing out your time and energy, which is a finite resource, so that you can enjoy the process as well, because there's really no point in doing the designing if you're not enjoying what you're doing. So tip number 1, start your work session with your most dedicated and brain-crunching project can be beneficial in several ways. Firstly, it allows you to tackle the most challenging task when your mind is freshest and most focused. Secondly, when you have completed the most difficult project, you will have a sense of accomplishment that will motivate you to continue working on the other projects. So this is something I do every single day, is I will sit down, I'll do my morning prep, whatever, but I know that when I sit down, I have a very singular focus on what's at hand. And I have a rough outline. You have to be super strict of what projects you want to get done for the day. For me, usually when I'm knocking out proofs, as you guys don't know, I work for Rudis Clothing Company in Marysville, where we do wrestling singlets, proofs for apparel from coaches and designers. And a lot of that is creative intensive work. Obviously, we work off templates and stuff like that. But we have a certain number of proofs that we have to get through the day based on descriptions from the coaching staff and salesmen. And we take that information and we create a proof. So sitting down the first part of the day, I can see all the information that coaches and salesmen have listed out, and I have to take that information and create a proof, which is done in Illustrator. Usually you take sublimated assets and designs and you create using team logos, and you create what their rough vision is based on the descriptions. So if I'm sitting down and I'm using these tools for long work sessions, I know I have the whole day to knock out. Say my proof goal is 6 proofs for the day. I know for the very first sitting, the very first work session, as soon as I sit down, I want to try and get as much done as possible. And that's the encompassing nature of this tip, is when you first sit down, put your nose to the grindstone and do as much as you can, because that's when you're going to be most excited and motivated to work. And this is very universal for me. It's not always. Sometimes I'll have my good days and my bad days. I'll have more high energy and low energy the first part of the day. But for the most part, as soon as I sit down, I've talked to some of the coworkers, the other designers. I've talked to Alan, Hope, Adeline, Sarah, Alex. I've talked to the other guys, and when I'm social, I feel good. And after connecting with some of the people, I'm ready to get to work, and I'm motivated, and I'm just happy to be there. I'm always grateful. So that being said, as soon as I sit down, most of my other coworkers know that when I sit down, I have the headphones on, the Bose headphones, and that's when that means don't talk to me. That means I'm getting ready to go to work. So I do this bout of work without any distractions, any music, no caffeine, at least for the first. This bout of work should last you anywhere between, as long as you can go, ideally, before you start to feel the fatigue of what you're doing. So ideally for me, this is over an hour, but if I can push that longer, then I'm feeling good, then I'm going to keep going. And before I get onto these other tips, another thing you guys should know is that this is a creative workflow. This isn't abiding by strict and rigid rules. This is some things that you can keep in mind that can help you to do your own best work. And I found that for myself, at least, and I think a lot of other creatives, is when you get too rigid with the guidelines of what you can and can't do, then that just constrains your thinking too much. So approach these as ways to improve your workflow rather than strict guidelines that, you have to follow or else you fail yourself, because that's not a healthy mindset to have. But so during this first block of the day where I'm doing a focused work session, my goal is to just get as much done as possible and really put my nose to the grindstone. And it doesn't have to, and when the first project you start with, it does not have to be the thing you're most excited to do. A lot of times it's actually one of the least exciting things that I do. So I start this project when I'm sitting down first part of the day to get ready and started. And this is this is usually the project I want to make the most progress on for the day. So it's not so much getting out of the way, but it's taking advantage of the hours of the day when I have the most energy and concentration and focus, and capitalizing on that the best I can. It's important to remember that this is a creative toolkit, like I said, but it also applies to other types of work in general, like admin or monotonous tasks. So if I have a day off, like a Saturday, or today is a lot of admin stuff, design, I can apply this tactic to that as well. Like, okay, I just sat down, I'm going to do as much of the nose to the grindstone, hard work as possible. And then at the end of that, I feel good that even if that's all I got done for the day, then I've made good headway on the things that I want to do. Tip number 2, avoid dopamine stacking. And I'll explain what that is. And do your best to always have a carrot on the other end of the stick that allows you to stay excited to pursue design and keep it work. So for those of you who don't know, this is a concept popularized by Andrew Huberman. He has a great podcast. Not so much related to designing, but he has several episodes with creatives and so forth about the neuroscience of creativity and the processes that go on in your minds that allow you to do your best work. So when I say avoid dopamine stacking, this is a pretty powerful lever that you can pull in terms of getting your best and most efficient and most productive work done while still enjoying the process. So those of you who don't know, dopamine stacking is a process of combining multiple activities or stimuli that increase the release of dopamine in the brain. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's associated with pleasure, motivation, and reward. By stacking activities that increase dopamine, individuals can experience a greater sense of pleasure and motivation. This can be achieved through a variety of methods, such as exercise, music, interaction, goal setting, and even certain foods. So when we take dopamine in the context of being a creative and designing, we don't want to have too many things that layer on top of each other that give us the pleasure of what we're enjoying doing. So ideally, as perfect humans and perfect designers and perfect creatives, we would get an immense amount of joy just from sitting down and doing the work, and I don't think that's the case for everyone. Obviously, we love what we do, and this is any kind of creative job. It can be any type of job in general. I don't care who you are. You don't feel a maximum amount of fulfillment and enjoyment every single minute that you're doing the thing. So that's just the reality of life. So how can we capitalize on that? And like we do here on the Creative Journal, try and turn that into a positive and use these tools for things that can help us create better product, get more enjoyment out of what we do, and unleash our creativity, and also at the same time satisfy our employers and clients. Gamifying it is super important. So, for example, putting this dopamine thing into practice. After I've done my first hard battle work, like we have talked about in tip number 1, then I will allow during that break some sort of dopamine, something that I get enjoyment from, whether this is a conversation with someone else, some kind of welcome distraction, whether it's, I take my first sip of coffee for the day, or maybe I move on to a more enjoyable task that I was looking forward to, that I can maybe exercise my creative muscles a little bit more. All these things are levers you can pull that will kind of keep you going throughout the day. And it plays a pretty massive role in, being able to work throughout the duration of your day while still kind of keeping that refreshment up and being more motivated to pursue things that allow you to do what you love in the first place, which is design. And this is the great thing about what it really comes in handy is if you have more skills that you can kind of stack on top of this, so you can divert to these different avenues. I know there's been a lot of talk about how task switching, excuse me, is very detrimental to performance. But if you can leverage the certain things that you get the most enjoyment out of and stick with that for a certain period of time while also being productive, then it's a great lever you can pull, and it's something that you should all do. So putting this into practice, maybe in the morning I'll do some kind of admin, some of the more monotonous work, and then I'll move on to a project that's more personal, something that I've been very excited to pursue. And throughout the course of the day, if you do this I wouldn't recommend doing this task switching thing 3 or 4 or more times. But by the end of the day, you've spent your whole day doing something that you would deem productive whilst also keeping yourself refreshed and energized. It's crucial to avoid layering on too many of the things like you do at once. So for example, if I was to sit down to start my day and I'm open to conversations with my coworkers, I'm drinking caffeine all day, I'm starting with the thing that I've been dreaming about starting, and I just do all that stuff at once, that's okay. And you'll probably have a very enjoyable time doing that. But then what happens in 2 or 3 hours when you get fatigued and all of a sudden you have no levers to pull that you can use to kind of motivate yourself to get through the day? Tip number 3, and this is probably the most important, but it's also one of the hardest to implement, but it's definitely played a role for me and helped me progress my skills and project value that I offer to clients, is to approach each work session as a student and try and find one specific and meaningful thing to learn, to take away and convert to your long-term memory. This could be a certain creative tool, certain workflows, and just a new implementation that kind of keeps you on your toes. And it sparks that new idea, that new sort of passion that you have for design and your work, and it breaks the monotony. I know this is scary, but going into and trying to do something differently, there's a fine line between efficiency and sticking around and creating processes that allow you to keep doing. That's what this is all about, is to use tools and processes that allow you to do the thing longer, even though they might not be ideal for something that you can sustain long term, right? These are all about adding things and being mindfully subtractive of other things that allow you to enjoy your day as a whole, even if in themselves and in other contexts, they don't lead to the best ever result. So when I say that, keep that in mind. It's important to break the monotony, even though if you're trying something new, whether it's a different layout in your Illustrator, whether it's a different workflow, a different process, a different tool that you use in Photoshop, or it's a different software. There's something to be said about the learning curve for productivity, i.e., if I try a new workspace each time I try Illustrator, then I won't be getting the most out of that work session because it may not be the most insanely productive. But then again, remember, tip 1, when you sit down to start your day, you have that node to the grindstone hard work session. You've already done the hardest and most productive work that you've done that you need to get done throughout the day. So even if this approaching another work session as a student and trying something new is something that sets you back a little bit and you may not be at your full maximum productivity, then you can still progress knowing that you've already done this first tip that allows you to get a lot of work done and allows you a bit more freedom to pursue new things and get out of your comfort zone a little bit, because that is important. It also has the double benefit of making you more engaged and focused, because you are literally trying to learn and stay focused, and to implement those things that you've learned, you need to remember them. So something that I do at the end of my work day sometimes is I will write down everything that I learned throughout the day. Sometimes I listen to podcasts as I work. And if at the end of the day, I try and write down everything that is in my short-term memory for the day, whether it's one of these tools that we tried out learning, or it's something that I heard on the podcast, or it's something that I wanted to get done later. At the end of the day, you sit down and you either write them out manually, journal them out, do whatever you can. It doesn't have to be super strict. Like I said, none of these rules are hard guidelines. It's just things that you can implement that might help your day. And it's also important to have a little bit of self-compassion when approaching these things, because there's been days when I do dopamine stack because I don't feel at my best and I feel like I need these things to keep me going. There's been other days when I don't need anything to keep me going. The thing in itself, like I said, ideally, just sitting down and doing the thing in itself would be enough to keep us going 100% of the time. But that isn't always the case. But like I said, back to tip 3, if you can just sit down at the end of the day and just rack your mind and try and remember the things that would make this day productive. What sets this day apart from the things in the past? Write that down in a journal. And I swear to you, if you write it down at the end of the day after everything's already happened, then looking forward and in the future, you will spend your day being more mindful and trying to remember the things for the sake of being able to write them down at the end of the day. And you get so much better at retaining the stuff you learn throughout the day. And it's just a better way to be more engaged in your life. And then you will see the rewards from this. I went from someone that didn't have a degree in design to now I work at a design agency, a clothing design agency full time. And there was a lot of software memorization and rote memorization skills that I had to engage in a short period of time. And this is something that helped me a lot, is to approach every day as a student and try and learn something new. And I hope that can help you guys out too. I know it will if you implement it. So to kind of wrap up, I just want to re-summarize our first episode of the toolkit for creatives. I plan to do a couple more of these episodes. Drop some questions in the description. Like, if you have any questions about dopamine stacking, or some of your favorite tips for long work sessions, things that have helped. I know caffeine's always a big one for me. Taking breaks is a big thing as well. But I think these are the 3 things. Number 1, starting your work session with your most dedicated and brain taxing project to start the day, and doing a long, nice, hard work session with 0 distractions. It's a great way to start your day. Number 2, to avoid dopamine stacking and always keep that carrot on the other end of the stick so that you're motivated and excited and your brain is in a proper state to get the most enjoyment and fulfillment and productivity out of your day. And number 3, my favorite, approach each work session as a student and try and find one meaningful and specific thing that you can learn, take away, and convert to long-term memory. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do, is we're trying to get better, And if you can approach your day as a student and just really try and break the monotony, then that's what's going to make it worth it for you as a designer. And that's what's going to keep you sustained throughout all these projects and all these different endeavors that you do as a creative, and all these different programs that can get overwhelming. But this is going to help you guys, and I'm very confident of that. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to the Creatives Journal podcast. This is entries 003, the Toolkit for Creatives Part 1. If you guys like this series, please drop in the comments. Please like on whatever platform you're listening to. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.